In this parent coaching episode, I'm speaking with the father of Scott, an 11-year-old sixth grader who's glued to his screens. YouTube, gaming, Fortnite, you name it. Scott's parents are concerned about his lack of other interests, growing resistance to limits, and how screen time is impacting his social development. If you're struggling to set healthy screen boundaries at home, this episode will give you a clear roadmap.
Welcome to the ADHD Parenting Podcast with Mike McLeod of Grow Now ADHD and Ryan Wexelblatt of ADHD Dude. Learn about parenting kids with ADHD from a licensed clinical social worker and speech-language pathologist who specializes in ADHD. No fluffy parenting advice, only practical information that will equip you to help your child with ADHD effectively.
Welcome, everyone. We are here with the father of Scott, who is 11 and in sixth grade. And welcome. And let me know where you want to start.
Thanks, Ryan. I appreciate you having me on here. I just wanted to say that I really appreciate everything that you've done with the podcast and with your materials, and I'm enjoying the membership site. And I'm also looking forward to this summer because my son is going to the summer camp too. So
Great.
He's really looking forward to that, and we're very excited for that opportunity as well.
Great. And thank you. I really appreciate the feedback.
My main concern with Scott, and we've been utilizing a lot of stuff that we've learned in the membership site and on your materials, but we're just having issues. My main issue with him is he's just so engrossed in the screens and the video games and the TV and the YouTube and all the things of that nature that it's just been very difficult. I'm just having a difficult time getting him off of those devices, and also we're looking to see how he can really have any other kinds of interests, because we have him in a couple of activities like scouts and karate and stuff like that, but it's almost like he uses activities as just an excuse to look forward to more screen time afterwards, and I'm just kind of concerned for his future. He's a typical ADHD. I mean, he doesn't have a whole lot of friends, and the friends he does have, he plays Fortnite with. And that's the other concern too. He just really doesn't seem to want to engage with people outside of the house. And I'm just looking for some ways we can maybe help ease him off of the electronics and into the world.
Yeah. So number one, I really appreciate you bringing this up because I think this is going to be extremely important for a lot of parents to hear. And one of the things that I tend to find is that, for many parents, they just kind of accept this and say, oh, he doesn't like anything but screen, so it just is what it is. And that can be really problematic because when kids are on this trajectory and they are not required to exhibit any type of flexibility and they're not required to participate in things that are not screen-based, this inflexibility tends to get much worse with age. So I just want to mention that I really, appreciate you being attentive to this, particularly at this age where it's much easier to deal with this than it would be if we were having this discussion, 3 years from now. So tell me this first. Has he always had kind of restricted interest, since he was younger, or is this kind of a newer thing? What would you say?
He's pretty much had restricted interest his as far as I can remember. It's pretty consistent.
All right. So this is just part of his profile then. Are there expectations in place at home for cooperation? So, in terms of, earning screen time, he has to, be amenable to going to the activities or whatever it is, or tell me what's set up at home.
Yeah, it's pretty much, unfortunately, we've gotten into the habit of kind of just letting him be. I mean, we put restrictions on these different devices, but, cumulatively, it ends up being a lot of hours per day. But, if he refuses to go to an activity, he does lose screen time. So we kind of hold that over his head as, all right, or if you don't go to karate, like you're not going on your screens until tomorrow kind of stuff. So we do kind of use it as if he does do something that we ask him to do, it's like he gets rewarded with more screen time. So I just would like to somehow eliminate, I almost want to flip the script and have him spend more time outside of screens instead of as what he does now, so as an example, I do have him in scouts and we do take him to all the outings, and they had a gaming outing this last couple of weekends. It was like a two night sleepover in one of the local camps. And, they unfortunately brought one of those Switch games to set up a Nintendo Switch. So
right.
He had the option of staying in the cabin and playing Switch or going outside and playing, like football and Ghost in the Graveyard with the other kids. And of course he chose to stay inside the cabin. He was like one of the only ones in there playing Switch. And when I confronted him about it, he said, well, this is a gaming outing. This is what this is for. So
right.
He's like, well, I can't argue with that, but you really, would like it to be outside. So yeah, so that's kind of where we're at.
Yeah. Okay. So for a few things, what is his screen time tied right now to, expectations that he knows he has to meet to earn them? Or is it more just that you threaten to take it away if he's not being cooperative?
It's more that we threaten to take away if he's not being cooperative.
Okay. Can we set something up that, there's daily expectations in place, both in terms of helping around the house and for behavior? And often that one of those behavioral expectations is being cooperative. That's probably in the, top 3 that I recommend to families a lot. So, how do you think it would work to set that up beforehand that he understands, in order to earn your screen time, these are the expectations for helping around the house, these are the expectations for behavior.
Yeah, I mean, we could certainly do that. And I think I've seen like lists where you can like have a certain amount of things that need to be done in a certain order each day. And if they're not done, then he chooses not to have screen time, that kind of thing.
So I go over this in the creating daily expectations course, and then in the downloadable section, there's actually examples that, for you to see how to do it. And there's actually a downloadable for, older kids as well, like a blank template to use. If you want to use that, obviously you don't have to. Because one of the things is, I want you to think about that when we threaten to take things away, that's my term for that is reactive parenting. We want him to understand that, screen time is not an entitlement you are owed and that I'm going to threaten and take it away when you're not being cooperative. Rather, it's something that needs to be earned for you meeting expectations. Both for helping around the house and for whatever the behavioral expectations are. So, with that, yeah, I would, and we don't, have to discuss it right now, but think about what would take precedence in terms of behavioral expectations, for him to, to earn it. Because that way, then you're able to shift away from the threatening to take it away, you know. So that's the first thing. The next thing is how much does he get a certain amount of time a day, or is it just kind of arbitrary based on the day?
I think it's pretty arbitrary at this point. We haven't been good about limiting.
All right. So how about this? How about as part of the, establishing the expectations, then it's, they can say, you meet these 4 expectations every day and you get your hour of screen time or whatever it is. So keep in mind, I always want people to know the American Academy of Pediatrics, their recommendations for screen time is no more than an hour on school nights or school days, no more than 2 hours on weekends. And I think that that's reasonable. Because the other thing is I think he's looking at this more of an entitlement rather than a privilege. He's
Right.
right now, and we want to shift that, right, to, almost think of it as being like dessert, right? You get dessert if you finish dinner. You don't finish dinner, okay, then you don't get dessert. So I think that's important that it's set up like that and that, there's always some flexibility for, time, obviously, but I think he needs to know that this is what you're getting during the week and this is what you're getting on weekends.
Okay.
Okay. Because part of this too, okay, if he's just getting excessive time on weekends, why would he ever be motivated to do anything else?
Right.
So I would say, set that up with the understanding that he's not going to be happy about this, and that's okay. We don't have to get into a long discussion or get into what I call like the reasoning vortex plot, trying to explain to him the reason. He's not going to like it, and that's okay. He'll get over it.
Okay.
And here's the other thing, if he's had restricted interest all his life, we can't force him to like something he's not going to like. We can't force him to be more flexible, but what we can do is not accommodate his inflexibility. And you're already doing that by having him involved in activities. So I think the other piece then is to, significantly limit the screen time to, an hour on school nights, 2 hours on weekend days, because then he's not going to have another option of things to do. He's going to have to find something.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm thinking it's just going to be almost like I think you mentioned at some point that the ADHD kids are more prone to different kinds of addictions and things like that. I really feel like he is at that point where he just needs to be in front of the screen because he'll go from one screen to the next to the next to the next. And if you kick him off of one, he's looking for the next. So I think it's going to be a process, and I think it's going to be difficult.
It will
initially.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
And keep in mind, this is not even necessarily an ADHD thing. I mean, lots of kids go from screen to screen, and we're living in a culture where this is permitted a lot. It just so happens that kids with ADHD are definitely more susceptible to problematic gaming. Which is why we need to have these very stringent criteria in place for this. Like we're talking about. So yeah.
and when we introduce these new limits, I mean, I'm assuming we should get him ready based on what I've learned from your material. We need to sit him down and say, okay, here's how it's going to be, or this is what we're doing, this is why we're doing it.
Yes, with a definitive start date for it as
Right.
well.
Okay.
Yeah, because this is gonna feel like a loss to him, right? He's gonna have to mourn the loss of having excessive screen time.
Right.
Right, and again, if he wants to make noise and, and say, "I'm not doing it," okay, fine, it's up to you whether you choose to earn your time or not,
Right.
and it's really as simple as that. Yeah.
One thing I know he's going to say is like, well, how can I earn more? Like, if he uses his 2 hours in the weekend, is there things I can do to earn more screen time? Is it worth, you know, using it as like a reward for helping around the house or doing extra chores or anything like that? Or is that something that we shouldn't even?
I would not even go there because if you open that door, then it's just going to be a constant negotiation of how do I get more time, right? So the answer for me would be no, you can't earn more time, but we can talk about other things you might want to earn. And then I would, have a brainstorming discussion with him, do you want to earn, working towards like a Lego set or whatever it is. Keeping in mind that whatever he earns has to be rather immediate because anything outside of his time horizon, his ability to visualize things in the future, it's going to be hard to motivate him.
Right. Okay.
But let him know that you are amenable to discussing other things he can earn, but it's not going to be screen time. I guess the one other thing I want to mention, and there is no right or wrong answer to this, but I would ask you to think about, is gaming the biggest problem or is it kind of across the board? And the reason I bring this up is I tend to find that TV and YouTube is not as problematic as everything else.
Okay. He spends the vast amount of his time on TV and YouTube. He basically watches other YouTubers game.
Yeah.
So,
Right.
yeah.
Right. Okay. So it sounds like maybe then it is equal across the board.
Right.
What? Yeah. Okay. All right. So yeah, and look, I would say, if it, to show him that you have some flexibility with this, I would say we can make, a different, we can give you a little, extra time, during, on, days off from school, and that extra time would be like a half hour, right? We don't want to get excessive about it.
Okay.
you know and I would also, not now, but when the time comes, you have to be very explicit about what this looks like for the summer, and I would not change it for the summer. I can tell you with my son I never did, because with my son, if I would have given him an inch, he would have asked for 3 feet.
Right.
when
Yeah.
when it
And
comes to the screen time. Yeah.
I'm just wondering in terms of, because the first thing he does when we do finally kick him off the screens is he really, I guess he's just not used to entertaining himself. He'll come to us and we'll have to entertain him, or he'll want to, and I don't mind spending time with him, but it's just like, it's very difficult for him to entertain himself. So I think maybe that's just because he's just used to being on screens and doesn't really have the option to figure that out. But I'm just hoping, the more time he spends off the screens, the more he realizes he likes to do, the more he realizes he can entertain himself and maybe pick up other things to do. So
Yeah, so a few things. One, keep in mind this might also be, a matter of, introducing him to some other things. So for instance, I recently suggested to somebody to get like a wood burning kit. This cheap wood burning kit on Amazon for, for a boy who, right, same issue. So we might need to expose him to some different things to see if anything, catches, and he might, say, well, I don't like anything. Like, okay, well, that doesn't mean you're getting more time, right? So that's the one thing. The other thing I would ask is, when he is getting off a constant struggle, or does he get off, cooperatively?
no, it's a constant struggle.
Okay. So in Executive Function Crash Course, I think it's the third video, I show a strategy to help him. It serves two purposes. One, it helps him learn to sense the passage of time, but also helps to get off video games without a fight. And what that is, it's using an analog clock and coloring it in with two different colors. So the colors represent the amount of time you have, and the secondary color shows what is called future plan time, which means that's when you have to start wrapping up the game in order to get off. Because part of his difficulty with getting off is that he's hyper focusing on something and he's not prepared for the transition. So if we can make the transition external and visual, that's going to help with this. So I would suggest watching that. Yeah, it's the third video in Executive Function Crash Course.
Okay.
Yeah. And I will tell you, out of everything I teach, people say that's one of the ones that they're surprised how helpful it is. Because when kids can, actually see time, yeah, that makes it easier. I'm not saying he's going to be happy, right, or agreeable to get off, but it'll be helpful, and it's helping him develop a sense of time as well.
Right. The one thing that I know it's going to have difficulty for us is one of his good friends moved to the UK.
Yeah.
And his only interaction with him is playing Fortnite. And it's UK at a time difference and stuff like that. He'll call in and Tyler will want to play with him. And then he'll be like, oh, but it's my friends. I want to hang out. I want to play, So it's just like, I almost would, I see myself caving in that situation, being like, okay, go hang out, go play with your friend. So I don't
Well,
know.
let me
It's kind of
ask
tough.
this, and again, no right or wrong answer to this. Can his time be used during that time when his friend is on?
Yeah, I mean, for sure. Yeah, I just,
Okay.
if it's a situation where he's already used his time for the day and then this friend calls, I see myself giving into that and being like, okay, we can have additional time with your friend, but
Right. And here's why I would tell you to be cautious with that, because I've seen kids use that constantly, to say like, "Oh, well, my friend's on her, and you're not letting me talk to them," and so on. So I would, explain to him when announce these changes that, if you want to use the time so you can talk to your friend, that's going to be your time for the day. Because again, we don't want him taking advantage of this and this being a constant negotiation, because that's just going to get exhausting, for you.
right, right.
Tell me a little bit about, like, what you mentioned with Scouts. You said he tends to be quieter and not really engaged?
Yeah, like when we go to the meetings, he's pretty much by himself. And unfortunately, sometimes he'll bring his phone. I'm trying to remember to take his phone before he goes to the meeting, but sometimes he'll be there on his phone. Or when he doesn't have his phone, he's off by himself. He's not really engaging with the other kids.
Okay. Has this always been the case, since earlier elementary school?
I feel like early elementary school, he was more social. I feel like he was more open to making friends and joining, groups and more outgoing. But now it seems pretty much by himself a lot. So,
Okay. The reason I'm asking is, well, it's two things. One, for a lot of kids with ADHD, they tend to be in their heads a lot. So, for instance, kids with a more inattentive profile, what they will often do, like during recess at school, is they'll just wander around the field kind of in their own head or making up imaginary games because they have difficulty engaging in reciprocal play. And for a lot of them, it's just more enjoyable to kind of be in their heads. But that actually, that eventually comes to a stop, because eventually they're going to want some interaction. The other aspect of this is if there's some social anxiety there. And what social anxiety is at its core, it's a fear of judgment by others. So, in his case, I don't, that why I asked you about earlier elementary school is because I'm wondering, was there always some social anxiety there, or was it more that he was just, in his head? What feedback have you had from school, regarding his social interactions with classmates?
I think it's been pretty decent though, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, my wife just is here as
Hi,
well.
Hi, I'm here. Yeah. Nice to meet you.
you too. So it's been pretty decent.
I have the counselor just go in and check on him once in a
Yeah,
while, and he has
good.
apparently has like a steady group of friends that he sits with, and yeah, it seems like okay. So I'm like, okay, maybe I don't have to worry so much about him, but I don't
Okay.
know. So
Let me ask this: Is Scouts mostly kids who he does not see on a regular basis? Outside of Scouts.
mostly
Correct.
yes.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. All right. So maybe he's a little less comfortable interacting with them just because he only sees them once a week,
Right.
possibly.
Yeah, that,
Okay.
that could be.
And how is he like on the, overnight trips if he doesn't have his phone?
He's mostly on his own as well, but he does interact. I mean, you kind of. I mean, the good thing, and the reason why I like Scouts is the older kids don't let him just kind of hang out. They say, all right,
Yes.
Scott, Scott, come over here. We need to help cook this meal or whatever. They don't really let him hang out on his own. They force him to be involved in the activity. So that's been good for him. I think the more he goes there, he didn't, that weekend where he sat on the switch instead of hanging out outside, there were one or two other kids that wanted to play as well. So he did seem to get closer to those kids. So I think it's maybe just a matter of time or a situation, or maybe just need to keep going. And I don't know, but I mean, the feedback from school is usually pretty positive, both academically and socially. So
Good. Okay. Yeah, and that's not unusual. If you don't see kids on a regular basis, you might be a little more reserved or a little more hesitant about them. But the fact that the older kids, require him to participate, I mean, that's great. And by the way, this is exactly why I say, and this is the truth, I have seen Scouts do more for kids than any of these silly social skills groups out there
right,
for this exact reason.
right.
You know. So yeah, so that's great. Okay. Anything else you guys wanted to discuss?
I guess I sometimes have problems with him, like if he's not listening to me, or if I'm trying to hurry him up to get like upstairs or something like that for bedtime. And I mean, we try to keep bedtime consistent, but it's like we get caught up in our own stuff sometimes.
Sure.
Yeah. And so I'll be like, oh, it's past the time where he wants to be, where I want him to be downstairs. And I'll be like, hey, let's go upstairs. And I'll like tell him like I don't mean to, but it's like every minute. I'm like, all right, let's go. And he'll be like, stop. I'm coming. And like,
Right.
like he gets like, he has an outburst like that. Or say like in a different situation, like if we were on a train or something and I tell him, Scott, just you have to get your bag out of the way. And he'll say like stuff like, I already did. Look, I can't do it anymore. And it's obviously there's like room for him to like do it. And it's I don't know, sometimes it becomes a back and forth, and I don't know, I just like I feel like I should correct him, but at the same time I don't want to give attention to this behavior, so sometimes I get confused as to what to do in those
Yeah.
situations.
So I don't think there's a right or wrong answer. I really think it depends on the situation, and the kind of the urgency with it. I guess, one thing I want to mention with the bedtime piece is this, that there's actually a course in the membership site called Better Bedtime Scaffolding. It's just a one video. And I talk about how to create a gradual transition to bedtime. And I think one of the things that, needs to be discussed is that, at this certain time every night, this is when he needs to be upstairs. So there's a concrete time. He knows that's what the expectation is, that he's to be upstairs. Doesn't mean he needs to be in bed, but it means he needs to be upstairs. And in the bedtime course, what I basically teach is kind of how to create a gradual transition to bed. So first we start with going upstairs. You can have time to whatever, it's watch a video or read or look at a book. So I think that might be helpful to watch that, just to kind of create that, but also have that definitive time that he needs to be upstairs, and that can be different for weeknights and on weekends.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And as for the other issue, is it that he doesn't like being rushed, or doesn't like being pressured? Do you think that's kind of the gist of it?
Yeah, I think it's a lot of that. But like usually I'm pretty good about I'll anticipate when I have to tell him to end something. I'll be like, "Okay, you got 5 minutes," and then I'll keep coming. You got 2 minutes," And he's usually pretty good about like ending whatever he's doing at by that time. So, but yeah, it's just like in these cases where like I realize it's past the time, and it's not it's just I get not frantic, but just I get upset because it delays my bedtime. So
Of course, yeah. No, I
yeah,
was the same way when my son was younger. Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean it's just like the frustration comes out, and yeah,
Yeah. So just one thing to keep in mind is, when you say 5 minutes or 2 minutes, that doesn't really mean anything to him. I mean, he understands what it means, but keep in perspective, he doesn't experience time the same way we do.
right,
So what I had mentioned, I think before you got here, was in the executive function crash course in the third video, I teach there how to use an analog clock to help kids sense the passage of time. Because in order to help kids develop a sense of time, they have to be able to see time in unit volume. And you cannot do that through a timer or through 5-minute warnings, because they're not visual,
okay, okay,
and they don't show you time in the future. So that's why timers don't work for that. Yeah. So I think if you just, watch that, that would probably be helpful with this. Because also, really, what it's doing is it's helping him learn how to, sense time, which he doesn't, particularly when something's interesting to him.
right. And with the outbursts, I should correct him right away, right? Or I should just. I get confused should I just ignore it, or should I just like address it? And I don't know.
Yeah. So here's what I would tell you. If he has the outburst because he feels like he's being rushed, or because you're getting a little frazzled because you want to go to bed, I would probably just remind him, hey, that's not the way we speak to each other, and just leave it at that. Because I mean the reality is he's being triggered by something, you
Right.
know. And if he's getting a little flustered because you're getting flustered, right? We kind of have to, we can't really come down on him for something that we're, kind of initiating, so to speak,
Right.
And I can tell you from my own experience, my son is the same way. Like, if I ever rush him, I would get screamed at, and then I have to remember, I'm causing this,
Right.
but it is okay to remind him that just, that's not how we speak to each other in our family.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
And just leave it at that without getting into like a back and forth.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I'll do that.
Yeah. All right. Anything else you guys wanted to cover?
I'm good. How about you?
I'm thinking, that, yeah, we're pretty good. But I think one of the interesting aspects, and this is something I've been reading just in the different ADHD materials and resources out there, is that the whole family is ADHD, both of us and our daughter. So it kind of adds another layer of complexity to this whole thing.
Absolutely.
'Cause a lot of stuff that we talked about, I mean, some of the stuff we know already. It's just hard to, sometimes we're not great at implementing or being consistent, It's something we get distracted ourselves with
Of
trying to
course.
get to bed on time and stuff. So
Yeah, absolutely. And keep in mind the more that we can kind of, implement a structure, for the kids and it's just going to help everybody, right? Because the more kind of structure and expectations there are, it helps the whole family with the understanding that you're not going to be perfect with and that's okay. Just you don't beat yourself up for it as long as you're putting in the effort, the kids know what the expectations are and things are clear to them. That's what matters at the end. At least there's something there. And as long as we're doing our best to follow it, that's what matters.
sounds good.
Yeah.
All
Thank
right,
you
it was
so
really
much.
good call.
Yeah, appreciate it. Thanks so much.
Nice to meet you.
Thanks for listening. To learn more about Mike's practice, Grow Now ADHD, please visit his website, grownowadhd.com. To learn about the services Ryan provides, please visit adhddude.com. You can find Mike on Instagram at grownowadhd and Ryan on the ADHD Dude YouTube channel. We'd love to hear your feedback or questions, so feel free to contact us at the ADHD Parenting Podcast at gmail.com. The ADHD Parenting Podcast and content posted by Grow Now ADHD or ADHD Dude are presented solely for general information and educational purposes. Our goal is to provide valuable insights and knowledge, not to replace professional services. Mike and Ryan cannot provide clinical consultation or free advice through social media or other forms of communication. The information on this podcast is not a substitute for professional advice. If you or your child have any medical or mental health concerns, please consult your healthcare professionals.